This video is about our minds and how we can use our brains to engage in conscious versus subconscious thinking. Our mind is like an iceberg depicted in the image. While we think we have good visibility over how our mind works, there's a whole part of the brain that lies beneath the surface that controls many of our actions. This is a part of the mind that we don't necessarily control. Knowing how it works, and more importantly, how to make it work for you, is critical to becoming a good investor. During this video, we'll examine behavioral finance, the emotional brain, conscious versus subconscious thinking, and the super fascinating topic of neuroplasticity. Now, the first question you may be asking yourself is what any of this has to do with investing, and specifically why we are sending you a presentation about the brain as your financial advisors. The reason is that while we work in finance, we also recognize that markets are directly impacted by people. The intersection of where finance and psychology meet is what we call behavioral finance. If you've ever wondered how a stock can go down 10% in a day or 25% in a month, it's helpful to understand how people think and the fear that sometimes drives them to make poor decisions. This video will examine that very topic. Let's get started.
When we hear the word emotion, most of us think of love, hate, happiness, or fear. Those strong feelings we experience throughout life. Our emotions are the driving force behind many of our behaviors, helpful and unhelpful. Just where do our emotions come from? Our brain is wired to look for threats or rewards. If one is detected, the feeling region of the brain alerts us through the release of chemical messages. Emotions are the effect of these chemical messages traveling from our brain through the body. When our brain detects a potential threat, our brain releases the stress hormones adrenaline and cortisol, which prepare us for a fight or flight response. When we detect or experience something rewarding, such as someone doing something nice for you, our brain releases dopamine, oxytocin, or serotonin. These are the chemicals that make us feel good and motivate us to continue on the task or behavior. In these instances, the feeling region of the brain kicks in before the thinking part. Sometimes the reactions of the feeling brain are so strong that it dominates our behaviors and we're unable to think rationally in the moment. Our emotions hijack our brain. While many of our emotional responses happen subconsciously, our thinking can influence our emotions, and sometimes this can be unhelpful. Just thinking about something threatening can trigger an emotional response. This is where we can manage our emotions with conscious thinking. Our emotions play a powerful role in the way we experience the world. Understanding and regulating our emotions through our thoughts and behaviors can help us take greater control of our brain and achieve our goals.
The feeling part of the mind is also known as the subconscious mind, and it's much older than our thinking brain or the conscious mind. When it senses danger, whether that's a dog about to attack or a stock going down, the fear response is very much the same. However, dealing with these two threats requires very different responses. In the first case, a fight or flight response is quite appropriate. Being quick, decisive, and absolute decision-making is appropriate. In the second case, when it comes to a stock going down, being slow, deliberate, measured, and thoughtful is what's required. We know that stocks go down for many reasons, and research has shown that staying the course through the ups and downs pays off. Selling a stock just because it's down over a short run without analysis to find out why is most certainly the wrong approach.
Our brain requires a great deal of energy to operate, particularly when we have to concentrate and think about something. Problem solving or making a decision not only uses more brain energy, it also can be a slow process. So our brain seeks to conserve energy by developing efficient ways of operating. One way it does this is through conscious and subconscious processing. Our brain seeks to automate much of what we do to save us time and brain energy. These are our brain's subconscious processes. They take care of our basic life functioning, our fight or flight response, and our learned behaviors and habits. We don't really think about these things. They just happen on autopilot or have become second nature. In fact, up to 95% of all our behaviors and reactions happen at the subconscious level. Our subconscious is also involved in the recording and storing of our experiences and knowledge, forming our memories. These are stored in our brain like photos in a picture album, which we can refer back to later. The way we think and feel about these experiences forms a frame around the photo. This is how we give people, objects, or events meaning. Over time, this is how our attitudes develop. For the most part, our subconscious processes help us navigate the world efficiently. Yet sometimes we might develop unhelpful habits or attitudes that prevent us from achieving our goals. This is where more conscious thinking can benefit us. Our conscious processing involves our higher thinking capacity, where we can be more mindful and considered in what we think, feel, and do. We can use conscious thinking to reprogram our subconscious and change our thoughts, attitudes, and habits. While thinking consciously takes more energy, it is how we take greater control of our brain and achieve our goals.
Think about what you experience when you're looking at your investments. Do you frequently utter the following phrases? How do we stop the bleeding? Talk me off the ledge. How long will this market go down? Let's take some money off the table. Or how can we end the pain? These are all phrases that are examples of your subconscious thinking. The reality is, you're not bleeding. And we hope you're not really standing on a ledge, thinking about jumping. Your 401k going down should have nothing to do with your happiness in this moment. If it does, you're letting your subconscious mind get a grip of your fear and anxiety. So what can you do?
Not so long ago, many scientists believed that the brain did not change after childhood, that it was hardwired and fixed by the time we became adults. But recent advances in only the last decade now tell us that this is simply not true. The brain can and does change throughout our lives. It is adaptable, like plastic. Hence, neuroscientists call this neuroplasticity. How does neuroplasticity work? If you think of your brain as a dynamic, connected power grid, there are billions of pathways or roads lighting up every time you think, feel, or do something. Some of these roads are well-traveled. These are our habits, our established ways of thinking, feeling, and doing. Every time we think in a certain way, practice a particular task, or feel a specific emotion, we strengthen this road. It becomes easier for our brains to travel this pathway. Say we think about something differently, learn a new task, or choose a different emotion. We start carving out a new road. If we keep traveling that road, our brains begin to use this pathway more, and this new way of thinking, feeling, or doing becomes second nature. The old pathway gets used less and weakens. This process of rewiring your brain by forming new connections and weakening old ones is neuroplasticity in action. The good news is that we all have the ability to learn and change by rewiring our brains. If you have ever changed a bad habit or thought about something differently, you have carved a new pathway in your brain and experienced neuroplasticity firsthand. With repeated and directed attention towards your desired change, you can rewire your brain.
Rewiring your brain is as simple as changing your focus. Tony Robbins, the practical psychologist and self-help guru, often says, "Where focus goes, energy flows." He gives us some actionable steps that we can take to change the way we feel. For example, take your morning routine and think about the following. If your daily pattern is to wake up, turn on the TV, and find out what's wrong with the world, how does that make you feel? What if you instead started your day with 10 minutes of meditation or prayer or self-reflection where you listed 5 to 10 things you were grateful for in your life? How would that change your life and your emotions? When you're grateful, you can't be worried, you can't be angry, and you can't be fearful. Anger and fear are what screw most people up in their lives. Most of our clients want to be happy, but their habits are leading them to be worried or stressed. So here's an example of what can be done, and also a warning of what can happen when you don't change your bad habits. In the first example on the left, I did something many years ago that many of you have experienced also. My wife and I made the decision that we weren't getting great value out of our cable TV, so we chose to cut the cord and get Netflix instead. We noticed an unintended consequence immediately. Our daily routine of turning on the news was disrupted. At first, it seemed unnerving, like we were so disconnected from the rest of the world. However, as time passed, we formed new habits to read books, magazines, and newspapers. Our attitudes and happiness also improved immensely. We didn't realize it at the time, but we were experiencing neuroplasticity in action. Our brains were actually rewiring themselves to our new reality. When I asked my wife Melissa if we should go back to cable several months later, she said definitively, "No way." On the other hand, here's a warning. Many of you are old enough to remember Black Monday, which occurred on October 19th of 1987. It was the single biggest drop in stock market history, with a record drop of 22.6% in a single day. While the reasons for the drop are still debated to this day, the role of fear and panic played in the aftermath aren't really debated. Emergency rooms from around the country reported a spike in admissions on that day. Tragically, there were several suicides in the aftermath from investors who were so despondent that they felt that they just could not go on. One such investor was considered an expert by his family when they later described him. What we now know is that the stock market soared and recovered from Black Monday almost immediately and retested a new high in less than a year. Simply waiting and taking some time to make a decision would have been the right move. So here's what we hope you take away from this video. Stand guard at the door of your mind. Only let things in that will benefit you and help you achieve your goals. Don't check your account more often than once a week. As your financial advisors, we are watching your accounts daily. We're trained, and we've trained our minds to be able to do this because we do it for a living. We recommend most of our clients not watch their accounts daily. Limiting how often you look will reduce your anxiety and smoothen out the daily fluctuations. If this still makes you anxious, reduce it further to your comfort level. As always, we're here to answer any questions you may have about your accounts. Recognize negative emotions that create psychological responses in the body. This can impair your decision-making capacity by hijacking your higher brain functions. If you feel inclined to make an important decision, consider calling your Verde advisor so we can talk through any potential ramifications. Last, limit your intake of negative news. So what are you focusing on? Are you unconsciously letting the media and cultural landscape of fear and anxiety draw your focus? Or are you choosing to stand guard at the door of your mind? Standing guard at the door of your mind does not mean living in a bubble or ignoring the reality in which you live. It simply means making conscious decisions about what you're willing to give to your time, energy, and effort to. In these times, we need to remember to stand guard. If you don't discipline your fears and controls, the world will gladly do it for you. From all of us at Verde, thank you.